On the morning of September 23, 1942, at precisely 0545 hours, Unteroffizier Ernst Bauer positioned himself in a camouflaged observation post overlooking the approaches to Stalingrad, peering through a massive Zeiss Zielvier 4X optical sight mounted atop a weapon that seemed fundamentally incompatible with precision long-range shooting. The rifle beneath the scope was a Karabiner 98k that had been shortened by approximately 20 centimeters from its standard configuration, creating a weapon that balanced like nothing Bauer had encountered during his extensive marksmanship training. The urban wasteland of Stalingrad would soon become the proving ground for a concept that violated every established principle of sniper rifle design. At 31 years of age, Bauer had already served as a designated marksman for 14 months on the Eastern Front and achieved 47 confirmed kills against Soviet personnel during operations that had taken him from the forests of Ukraine to the industrial ruins of Russia's most strategically important city. He had trained with the standard Karabiner 98k sniper rifle configuration at the Wehrmacht Marksmanship School in Zossen, where instructors had emphasized the critical relationship between barrel length, velocity, and accuracy at extended ranges. The weapon before him violated those principles systematically. The barrel had been cut down from the standard 600 mm length to approximately 380 mm, reducing the rifle's overall length by nearly one-third. The modification transformed the Karabiner 98k from a long-range precision weapon into something resembling a cavalry carbine. Yet the massive Zeiss scope mounted atop the abbreviated receiver suggested that someone expected this truncated weapon to deliver precision fire at distances where barrel length traditionally mattered enormously. The tactical situation in Stalingrad during autumn 1942 presented German forces with combat conditions that no training manual had adequately addressed. The battle had devolved into brutal close-quarters fighting through industrial complexes, apartment buildings, and rubble-strewn streets where engagement ranges rarely exceeded 200 meters. Standard sniper rifles optimized for engagements at 400 to 800 meters proved cumbersome in confined spaces, their length making rapid movement through doorways and stairwells difficult, and their weight becoming a liability during the constant repositioning that urban combat demanded. Soviet snipers had adapted more quickly to these conditions, employing lighter weapons and accepting reduced effective range as a necessary trade-off for improved mobility. German commanders studying casualty reports during August and September 1942 noted that Wehrmacht snipers were being outmaneuvered by Soviet counterparts who could move through urban terrain faster and establish firing positions more quickly. The standard German sniper configuration, superbly effective in open terrain, was proving suboptimal in the rubble of Stalingrad. The shortened rifle concept emerged from field observations rather than any formal development program. Experienced snipers noted that most engagements in Stalingrad occurred at ranges where the velocity loss from a shortened barrel would have minimal impact on terminal ballistics. A 7.92 by 57 mm Mauser round, fired from a 380 mm barrel, still retained more than adequate energy to defeat standard infantry equipment at 200 meters, and the difference in trajectory compared to a full-length barrel amounted to only a few centimeters at typical urban engagement distances. The weight reduction proved significant. Removing 20 centimeters of steel barrel eliminated approximately 450 grams from the weapon's forward end, shifting the balance point rearward and making the rifle dramatically faster to maneuver in confined spaces. A sniper moving through a destroyed apartment building could bring the shortened weapon to shoulder and acquire targets in roughly 60% of the time required with a standard-length rifle, a difference that often determined whether the sniper fired first or died first. Bauer had received his modified rifle on September 18th, 5 days before the engagement that would test its capabilities under actual combat conditions. The weapon had been prepared by an armorer attached to the 24th Panzer Division, a former gunsmith from Munich who had served with the unit since the invasion of Poland in 1939. The armorer, whose name Bauer recorded in his combat log as Meister Hoffmann, had developed a systematic procedure for shortening Karabiner 98k rifles while maintaining sufficient accuracy for urban employment. Hoffmann's procedure began with careful measurement and marking of the barrel at the desired cutting point, approximately 20 centimeters forward of the receiver. The cut had to be executed perpendicular to the bore axis within tolerances of less than 1 degree to prevent accuracy degradation. Hoffmann used a lathe when available, though field conditions often required him to perform the work with hand tools and improvised jigs that he fabricated from salvaged materials. After cutting, the barrel required re-crowning to ensure that gases escaping from the muzzle did so uniformly around the bullet's base. An improperly crowned barrel would produce erratic accuracy as escaping gases deflected the bullet unpredictably during the final milliseconds of its transit through the bore. Hoffmann developed a hand crowning technique using successively finer abrasives, creating a subtle 11-degree crown that matched the geometry of factory-produced barrels, despite being executed under field conditions. The front sight required repositioning to account for the shortened barrel. Hoffmann fabricated a dovetail slot at the appropriate location, then installed a sight blade salvaged from damaged rifles. The rear sight remained in its original position, though the abbreviated sight radius, the distance between front and rear sights, reduced the theoretical precision of iron sight aiming. This limitation proved irrelevant for scoped rifles where the optical sight replaced iron sights for precision engagement, but Hoffmann insisted on maintaining functional backup sights in case scope damage rendered the primary optic unusable. The massive Zeiss Zielvier 4X scope that Hoffmann mounted on Bauer's rifle represented German optical engineering at its finest. The scope provided 4-power magnification with exceptional clarity across its entire field of view, utilizing multi-coated lenses that reduced light loss and improved contrast in the low light conditions common in Stalingrad's destroyed buildings. The reticle incorporated a range-finding stadia that allowed experienced snipers to estimate target distance with reasonable accuracy, though the reticle's calibration assumed a standard velocity 7.92 mm round from a full-length barrel. The velocity reduction from the shortened barrel meant that the reticle's range-finding marks no longer corresponded precisely to actual distances. Hoffmann had calculated the approximate velocity loss, roughly 120 meters per second compared to a standard barrel, and provided Bauer with a table of corrections that compensated for the ballistic differences. At 100 meters, the correction was negligible. At 200 meters, Bauer needed to hold approximately 15 centimeters high compared to what the reticle indicated. At 300 meters, the holdover increased to 45 centimeters. Bauer had spent 4 days familiarizing himself with the modified weapon before his first combat employment. The 24th Panzer Division maintained a makeshift firing range in a relatively quiet sector west of Stalingrad, where snipers could zero their weapons and practice engagement techniques. Bauer fired approximately 80 rounds through the shortened rifle, documenting the point of impact at various ranges and confirming Hoffmann's ballistic calculations. The shortened barrel produced a noticeably sharper muzzle blast compared to the standard configuration. The reduced barrel length meant less time for propellant gases to expand before exiting the muzzle, resulting in higher exit pressures and correspondingly louder sound signature. The increased blast created additional considerations for tactical employment, as the distinctive sound made the weapon easier to locate acoustically compared to standard sniper rifles. The muzzle flash proved similarly enhanced. Unburned propellant exiting the shortened barrel continued combusting in the open air, creating a visible flash that was substantially larger than that produced by a full-length barrel. During daylight operations, the flash presented minimal tactical concern, but night firing revealed the shooter's position with dramatic clarity. Bauer noted in his combat log that the shortened rifle was suitable for daylight operations only, as nighttime employment invited immediate counterfire from any Soviet forces with line of sight to the firing position. The accuracy from the shortened barrel exceeded Bauer's initial expectations based on his training. At 100 meters, the rifle consistently grouped 5-shot strings within a 4-centimeter circle when fired from a stable rest. At 200 meters, the group size expanded to approximately 12 centimeters. At 300 meters, the maximum range at which Bauer anticipated engaging targets in Stalingrad, the groups opened to roughly 25 centimeters, still adequate for reliable hits on human-sized targets when the fundamentals of marksmanship were properly executed. The weapon's handling characteristics differed dramatically from the standard sniper rifle configuration. The reduced length and forward weight made the rifle substantially more maneuverable in confined spaces, confirming the original hypothesis that had motivated the modification. Bauer could navigate through rubble-choked doorways and stairwells with the shortened rifle, where a standard configuration would have required awkward angling to clear obstacles. The improved handling came at a cost in shooting stability, as the lighter forward end was more susceptible to wobble during aiming, demanding stronger muscular control to maintain the sight picture. Bauer's first combat engagement with the modified rifle occurred on September 23 when Soviet forces launched a probing attack against German positions in the factory district. A Soviet infantry company advanced through the ruins of a tractor factory, using destroyed machinery and collapsed walls for cover as they attempted to locate the forward edge of German defensive positions. Bauer had established his observation post in the third-floor room of a partially destroyed administrative building overlooking the factory approaches. The engagement range varied between 120 and 220 meters as Soviet soldiers moved through the industrial ruins. Bauer engaged his first target at approximately 180 meters, a Soviet soldier who had paused behind a concrete wall to signal others forward. The massive Zeiss scope gathered sufficient light in the pre-dawn darkness to provide a clear sight picture despite the low ambient illumination. Bauer placed the reticle's center crosshair on the visible portion of the soldier's torso, applied Hoffmann's correction for the reduced barrel velocity, and squeezed the trigger. The 7.92 millimeter round struck approximately 8 centimeters higher than Bauer had aimed, indicating that his holdover correction had been slightly excessive. The Soviet soldier collapsed immediately, the impact visible through the scope as a distinct disturbance in the soldier's posture before he disappeared behind the concrete barrier.
Bauer cycled the bolt action rapidly, chambering a fresh round while maintaining his sight picture on the area where additional Soviet soldiers might appear. The second target presented himself approximately 40 seconds later, emerging from behind the same concrete barrier to check on the fallen soldier. Bauer adjusted his aim point slightly lower based on his first shot's impact, compensating for the overcorrection he had applied. The second shot struck the Soviet soldier in the upper chest, producing an immediate collapse. 2 shots, 2 casualties at ranges where the shortened barrel's velocity reduction had minimal tactical impact on terminal effectiveness. The Soviet forces responded to the sniper fire by attempting to locate Bauer's position through acoustic triangulation and visual observation. Several soldiers fired rifles in Bauer's general direction, though their shots struck well away from his actual position in the third-floor room. The partially destroyed building provided numerous windows and openings from which a sniper might fire, creating ambiguity about the precise location of the shooting position. Bauer remained motionless for approximately 3 minutes, allowing the Soviet search efforts to focus on incorrect locations before engaging his third target. The third shot presented a more challenging engagement. A Soviet soldier had positioned himself approximately 210 meters distant, partially concealed behind a destroyed industrial crane. Only the soldier's head and shoulders were visible above the crane's wreckage, presenting a target roughly 30 centimeters in width. Bowers settled the reticle carefully, accounting for both the range and the reduced target size, and fired. The shot struck the crane's metal framework approximately 15 centimeters to the left of the intended impact point, producing a bright spark but no casualty. The miss revealed a limitation of the shortened barrel that Bauer had not fully appreciated during his range familiarization. The reduced barrel length meant reduced rotational stability imparted to the bullet as it traveled downrange. The 7.92mm projectile exited the shortened barrel with fewer rotations compared to a full-length barrel, resulting in slightly degraded gyroscopic stability and increased susceptibility to crosswind deflection. A light breeze that Bauer had not adequately accounted for had pushed the bullet offline during its 210-meter flight. Bauer adjusted his aim to compensate for the wind effect and fired again. The second shot struck the Soviet soldier in the head, producing an immediate casualty. The engagement had consumed 4 rounds to achieve 3 casualties at ranges between 180 and 210 meters, demonstrating both the weapon's capability and its limitations when employed at the upper end of its effective range envelope. The Soviet attack faltered following the sniper engagement, with the infantry company withdrawing to positions beyond effective observation range. Bauer remained in his firing position for another 2 hours, scanning the approaches through his Zeiss scope but identifying no additional targets worth engaging. The modified rifle had performed its intended function, disrupting a Soviet attack through precision fire at ranges where the shortened barrel's characteristics did not significantly degrade combat effectiveness. Word of the engagement spread through German sniper sections operating in Stalingrad during the following days. Other snipers began requesting similar modifications to their rifles, seeking the improved maneuverability that the modified configuration provided. Meister Hoffmann's workload increased dramatically as requests for barrel shortening arrived from multiple units engaged in the urban fighting. Hoffmann refined his procedures based on feedback from snipers who had employed the modified rifles in combat.
He determined that 380 millimeters represented the optimal barrel length for Stalingrad conditions, providing maximum maneuverability while retaining adequate accuracy at typical urban engagement ranges. Barrels shortened beyond 380 millimeters experienced excessive velocity loss and accuracy degradation, while barrels longer than 380 millimeters provided diminishing returns in ballistic performance while sacrificing the maneuverability advantages that justified the modification. The scope mounting presented technical challenges that required careful attention. The massive Zeiss Zielvier 4x scope weighed approximately 650 grams, and mounting such a heavy optic on a shortened rifle shifted the weapon's balance point significantly rearward. Hoffmann experimented with various mounting positions, eventually determining that positioning the scope as far forward as the action would permit created the most favorable balance characteristics. The forward mounting also provided slight relief from the scope's eye relief requirements, allowing snipers to acquire proper sight pictures more quickly when bringing the rifle to shoulder. The mounting rings required precise alignment to prevent scope cant, a condition where the scope's optical axis was not perfectly parallel to the bore axis. Even minor cant angles caused point of impact to shift laterally as range increased, degrading accuracy at extended distances. Hoffmann developed an alignment procedure using a plumb line and carefully machined reference surfaces that ensured scope alignment within tolerances of less than 0.5 degrees, adequate for the ranges at which the shortened rifles would be employed. Soviet intelligence became aware of the German modified sniper rifles during October 1942 through examination of several examples recovered from German casualties. Soviet technical intelligence reports documented the modifications with considerable interest, noting the ingenious adaptation of a long-range precision weapon for close-quarters urban employment.
The reports concluded that the German modifications demonstrated tactical flexibility and reflected accurate assessment of the unique combat conditions that Stalingrad imposed on both forces. Soviet snipers had already adapted to urban conditions using different methods, primarily through employment of the Mosin-Nagant rifle with standard-length barrels, but utilizing more aggressive movement tactics that compensated for the weapon's length. The Soviet approach accepted the handling limitations of a full-length rifle in exchange for retaining maximum effective range, relying on superior knowledge of urban terrain and faster position changes to offset the German modifications' maneuverability advantages. The tactical implications of the two different approaches became evident during sniper duels that characterized the Stalingrad fighting. German snipers with shortened rifles could maneuver more quickly through confined spaces and establish firing positions faster than those equipped with standard rifles. Soviet snipers with full-length weapons retained superior accuracy at the longer ranges that occasionally presented themselves when engagement geometry permitted shots across wider open areas. Neither approach was universally superior, with effectiveness depending on the specific tactical situation that each engagement presented.
The rifle's durability under sustained combat employment proved adequate, though not exceptional. The shortened barrel heated more rapidly than a standard-length barrel during sustained firing due to the reduced metal mass available to absorb and dissipate heat energy. Bauer noted that accuracy began degrading noticeably after approximately 15 rounds fired in rapid succession, with the heated barrel beginning to string shots vertically as thermal expansion changed the barrel's dimensional characteristics. Allowing the barrel to cool for 10 to 15 minutes restored accuracy to baseline levels. The barrel's service life appeared to be shorter than a standard-length barrel, based on Bauer's observations and those of other snipers employing modified rifles. Throat erosion, the wearing away of rifling at the chamber end of the barrel, where hot propellant gases first contacted the steel, progressed more rapidly in the shortened barrels. Hoffmann hypothesized that the higher chamber pressures required to achieve acceptable velocities from the shortened barrel accelerated throat erosion, though he lacked the measurement instruments necessary to confirm this theory definitively. Bauer's rifle required barrel replacement after approximately 1,200 rounds, compared to the 2,500-round service life typical of standard-length barrels. The replacement barrel came from a damaged rifle recovered from a German casualty, inspected by Hoffmann and determined to be serviceable despite the original rifle's destruction. Hoffmann repeated his shortening procedure, creating a replacement barrel that matched the dimensions and performance characteristics of Bauer's original configuration. The scope proved more durable than the barrel, maintaining its zero and optical clarity throughout months of combat employment, despite the harsh conditions that characterized urban fighting in Stalingrad. The Zeiss optical engineering that had created the Zielvier 4 scope incorporated robust construction and careful attention to environmental sealing that protected the internal optics from dust, moisture, and shock. Bauer documented only one instance where scope adjustment was required, following a fall while moving through a collapsed building that had subjected the rifle to impact forces severe enough to shift the scope's mounting system. The tactical doctrine governing employment of the shortened sniper rifles evolved through practical experience rather than formal instruction. Bauer and other snipers developed a set of best practices that maximized the weapon's advantages while managing its limitations. These practices emphasized aggressive movement between firing positions, exploitation of the weapon's superior handling in confined spaces, and disciplined fire control that kept engagements within the range envelope where the shortened barrel remained effective.
The German Sixth Army's final months in Stalingrad saw continued employment of the modified sniper rifles as the tactical situation deteriorated and German forces were compressed into an ever-shrinking perimeter. The shortened rifle's maneuverability advantages became even more pronounced as fighting occurred in increasingly confined spaces where standard-length weapons were difficult to employ effectively. Snipers equipped with the modified rifles reported higher engagement rates compared to those with standard configurations, though the overall strategic situation had degraded to the point where tactical advantages at the sniper level could not influence the battle's outcome. Bowers survived the encirclement of Stalingrad and evacuation by air on January 18, 1943, among the last German personnel to escape the collapsing pocket. His shortened rifle remained behind, abandoned in a defensive position that Soviet forces overran hours after his departure. The weapon's ultimate fate remains unknown, though it likely joined thousands of other German weapons captured by Soviet forces during the final days of the Stalingrad battle.